the delegates, on behalf of Indian Psychiatry Society IPS South Zone, I cordially invite you all for today's the scientific program being organized by the IPS South Zone Women Empowerment Subcommittee named Samanvi. This Samanvi program is since inception, in spite of the COVID pandemic situations, they are doing the fantastic job, particularly the issues, the women issues, various social issues they are addressing by inviting various speakers throughout the India, particularly working in the field of women empowerment. This is the fourth consecutive program being organized by the Samanvi successfully. Now, this is the program being this is the first program being the in the IPS South entire IPS. This is the our zone IPS South Zone being the first to take this type of challenges and being wonderfully organized, and similarly the southern states are also there by taking as a role model of IPS South Zone. They initiated their programs someone in the respective states. So throughout the Indian Psychiatry Society, they are being observing us and how actively they are doing our activities in spite of the COVID pandemic situation under the leadership of dynamic leader, our President, Dr. Ramakrishnan sir. Now I would like to invite for today's program, Dr. Ramakrishnan sir, to preside over the today's function. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh.
Next, I would like to invite Dr. Radhika Reddy, the chairperson of Samanvi Committee. Madam, please join us. She is the Professor of Psychiatry, Vijayawada Government Medical College. And I invite S.M. Manohari, Professor and HOD, St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. She is readily consented to be the chairperson of today's scientific program. Madam, I welcome you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And now invite our today's guest speaker, Prabha S. Chandra, the Professor of Psychiatry, particularly in charge perinatal psychiatry, and the President-elect of International Association of Women Mental Health. Sorry, man. International Association of Women Mental Health President-elect. I welcome you all for today's scientific program. Now I request our President Ramakrishnan sir to preside over the program. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh, for your nice welcome address. And I thank Samanvi team headed by Dr. Radhika Reddy, Dr. Smita, Dr. Indumadi, Dr. Nivedita, and Dr. Piti Pai. See, ever since it was conceived and put forward to the Women Empowerment Committee, they have taken it as a challenge that did come with a good name, Samanvi. And it is going great guns. So a lot of social issues have been discussed about the role of women, and one topic on issue of rape survivors, one topic on cyber crime. It was a wonderful program, all organized very well and well attended. That's what again I am very happy. And we had the gift of the honoring Professor Sarada Menon on International Women's Day. There was a very wonderful program organized last time. And today's topic, I think it is the need of the hour. Actually speaking, women's maternal mental health, which is known to all people, but not focused. That's what I would say. Honestly speaking, whenever a wife becomes pregnant, the couple are bubbling with happiness, the whole family is with happiness, and everyone like to help the mother and they will, because they are, and other day, if you go back, they will be showered with all sorts of fruit, nutritious things, or they will not let the mother to do any work. They will be pampered. The pampering of the childhood they can see only when they conceive a baby. So that is the thing. They will enjoy everything. Ma, bring water. Ma, bring food. Everything it will be done with happiness, because they our people, our elder people understood the need for the mother to be very happy. That is the ultimate thing. Even fighting for the husband will be soft. So that was the our Indian culture and things. Without naming as maternal mental health, they were caring so much. But nowadays, because of what is that is a nuclear family, both husband of going, even in pregnancy, you have to go to job till the last trimester. See, all these things have made a big impact on the maternal mental. That's what I could understand from my 30 years of practice, what I am observing. There is a seesaw change in the mental health issues, because they're not able to care, husband is not helping us to cook, and I think so many issues are happening. And another thing, what happening nowadays, suppose a lady is under our treatment for depression or anxiety, we give anxiolytic or 100%, and believe you, some bipolar patients, some ELA schizophrenia patients, they conceive and all, they go to gynecologist obstetrician immediately. See, the moment the first thing they tell to the patient's family, stop psychiatric medicines. Then gone is everything. Gone is gone. They stop all our medicines, they worsen, they come at a bad state. I have seen many violent people, violent mothers, at the age of at the last trimester. We cannot do any medication. I think something we are forced, and at the last resort, we are forced to give ECT for those people without altering the biological this thing, medicine, metabolic side effects, and other things. So this is another aspect. And postpartum also is a big issue, because as Madam and Dr. Manohari are going to discuss about postpartum blues and other things, which is not recognized. And I tell you now, we are all very fast world nowadays. So it is under recognized. And you won't believe, in my 30 years of practice, I have seen at least more than 1,000 pregnant or postpartum clients, of which 80% are referred by our old clients that, sir, this lady is having psychiatric problem after delivery, we have brought. But gynecological reference is very low. And still, we are not able to get over the phobia for those gynecologists, how to refer properly. I have seen suicides after postpartum. All these things are very burning, and that's why what I was talking to Dr. Indumati and Radhika Reddy and our team is, we have to. It is not, you don't go for only psychiatrists. Go for public, because the public should understand the value of perinatal psychiatry. See, that is what my intention, and I am very happy. Yesterday, I texted a message to our Samanvi group that only 140 have registered and up the ante. That's what I mentioned. Can you believe that within one day there are 406 people have registered within the span of one day? 300. Yesterday night I saw within 2 hours 100 people have registered. I don't know what they did, and thanks to all the team as well as our psychologists and social workers. They did wonderful job, and their number is increasing. And I hope that the message spreads and the messenger is none other than Dr. Prabha Chandra Madam, an international figure in perinatal psychiatry. And over the past 5 to 6 years, only this perinatal psychiatry is coming up in our India, and she is heading the department now. And she is an ambassador. That's what I will say. And she will be, and whole women psychiatrists will be proud that Dr. Pratibha Murthy has been appointed as the director of NIMHANS, the second lady to don the mantle after Dr. Gauri Devi. So again, our Samanvi is taking up in other areas also. See, I'm very proud of all the achievements of our women psychiatrists, and right from what I told about Sar Rahman and first woman psychiatrist whom we honored, Dr. Savita Malhotra. There are torchbearers all over our India, and they're giving this direction to all people. They're in a position where they can make policy decisions and also have an impact on upcoming psychiatrists. And recently, over the past 3 years, I've been seeing number of women psychiatry postgraduates are increasing. In our Tiruchi Medical College, there are 4 seats for MD. All 4 are ladies this year. So people nowadays understand the value of psychiatry and they want to have a peaceful life, do counseling and other things. So your speech and Dr. Manohari's wisdom and Radhika Reddy's wisdom and all will enlighten the people about the need for maternal mental health. I don't want to take much of your time, and now I hand over the thing to Dr. Radhika Reddy, chairman of chairperson of, and they will be offended, chairman. There is a habit, that's the problem. You are changing our attitude, chairperson of women's committee. And I thank profusely Dr. Prabha Chandra madam for this wonderful time you are going to give us, and Dr. Manohari madam for giving your wisdom. She is also from MRCP Psych from UK, and she has come down to settle in Bangalore and giving more of adolescent psychiatry, and again that sexual issues and all she's addressing, which are very difficult to handle, and she has taken a very difficult area, and I'm proud of you, madam, and thank you all the people who have joined in great number for this meeting. And I also thank our EC, Professor Dr. Raman Irad, Secretary Dr. Suresh, Treasurer Gangaram, and all for cooperating with all these things and making it a success. And I welcome Dr. Smita. In spite of her duty, she's joining. She is a very dynamic lady. I appreciate her, and she is very obsessive with the details and other things. And I'm very happy that she's joining now. Thank you so much.
I joined because the video was not picture.
Yeah.
Sorry for being.
No problem. Because you are bound to government duties, no? Dr. Radhika Reddy, madam.
Unmute, madam. Radhika Reddy. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for giving us this opportunity. And on behalf of Samanvi South Zone Women Empowerment Committee, I invite all the faculty and the members and the senior colleagues, and my wishes to Dr. Ramakrishnan sir, Madam, Dr. Prabha Chandra madam, and Manohari madam, and all my dear colleagues. So I welcome you all for this evening. And actually we planned this for this talk on perinatal psychiatry in the month of May. Due to this peak second wave, we could not do that. We wanted to observe that World Maternal Mental Health Day, actually, which was in May. But unfortunately, we could not do that. And anyway, we don't want to postpone that. And though it is late, never then it's better to be late than not addressing that issue. So as our president has mentioned, a very important topic, today's topic, which has to be addressed by the most dynamic and the most important and valuable ambassador for this maternal mental health, Dr. Prabha Chandra Madam, has to address that. Then only the importance will and the awareness will reach the public. And we planned such a way that it is not only for the psychiatry members of our group, not only that, and we wanted that to reach the common people, or and also the other mental health professionals too. So that was our targeted audience for this group. And so we were a little late in capturing the registrations actually. Yesterday, as sir told, it was only 150 yesterday, but for today it became 400 people has registered right now. That's because people are forgetting. If we are telling them because there are so many webinars and so many programs, and they are registering and they are not attending also. So that is one reason we wanted to highlight that in the day before the topic. And today's topic is that life needs to be understood backwards. And the title itself doesn't exactly look like a mental health issue is coming up in this topic. That is the reason Madam has chosen that topic, so that that title, so that it will reach the general public. So the especially that is the main reason behind the title. And then next thing is Dr. Which I want to introduce is the Madam Manohari Madam. Though I don't know Madam personally, so I couldn't, I never met her personally, Dr. Manohari Madam, but I have seen in the pictures. Madam appears very kind-hearted and very pleasant, and looking at her itself, I think the patients will definitely become pleased. And I just got the opportunity of introducing Manohari Madam right now. Madam Professor S.M. Manohari, she did her MBBS from Coimbatore Medical College in 1987, and a DPM and DNB from MINHANS in 1991 and 93. MRC Psych from Royal College of Psychiatrists, London in 1996. And she also underwent training in child and adolescent psychiatry in premier institutes in UK. And after working there as a lecturer, and then she came to India and worked as lecturer and assistant professor in medical college, and also in Bangalore Medical College and Victoria Hospital. And she is currently working as professor and head of the department at psychiatry at St. John's Medical College. And she is also a consultant in child and adolescent psychiatry. And her areas of special interest are ADHD and eating disorders and adolescent sexual behaviors and all. So I welcome Dr. Manohari Madam for this wonderful evening. And Madam will be giving her address, and also Madam will be introducing our speaker, Dr. Prabha Chandra Madam.
Thank you very much for your.
On the behalf of IPS South Zonal Branch and Samanvi team, I am very proud to present this memento to Madam Manohari Madam, and this will reach you in couple of days because of the logistic reason. I am presenting now, and within a couple of days it will reach you, Madam. Thank you. Kindly request you to accept this, Madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much to all the organizers, the president of the South Zone and the members of the Sanmani for inviting me here. I consider it a privilege to introduce Dr. Prabha Chandra and to chair this session. To the world of psychiatry, and especially to people interested in perinatal psychiatry and women's mental health, Dr. Prabha needs no introduction. But this is a formal session, and so a formal introduction is being made. So let me read out a few things that uh, a very brief summary of some of the achievements of Dr. Prabha Chandra. Dr. Prabha Chandra has done her MD from NIMHANS. She is also a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians from Edinburgh. She's a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists from UK, and she's also a fellow of the Academy of Medicine from Singapore. And she currently works as a professor of psychiatry at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in Bangalore, India. She was the head of the Department of Psychiatry in NIMHANS from 2016 to 2019. Her fields of interest include women's mental health, reproductive psychiatry, perinatal psychiatry, palliative care, ethics, pedagogy, and youth mental health. She has received grants for 14 research projects as principal investigator from national and international funding agencies. Her current major grant is for the project of the Bangalore Child Health and Development Study Cohort. This is funded by the ICMR, the UK and MRC UK projects. This Bangalore Child Health and Development Study is a cohort of 909 women recruited in the first or the second trimester of pregnancy and later studied at 8 weeks, 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years of infants' age between 2014 and 2019. It is the first mother-infant cohort in India with detailed mental health assessments. She has a large number of publications, 312, including 205 in journals that are peer-reviewed and indexed. She has edited several 5 books and has written several chapters in books. Her articles have been cited 6,155 times, which is no small feat at all. And with H index 41 and I10 index 128. She is the associate editor of the Archives of Women's Mental Health, and she's on the editorial board of the most prestigious Lancet Psychiatry from 2018 till date. Dr. Prabha Chandra has also held several international positions. She is currently the president-elect of the International Association of Women's Mental Health. She is an executive member of the International Marseille Society for Perinatal Psychiatry. She held this position from 2006 to 2008 and from 2016 till date. She is also a temporary advisor to the WHO and the UN-AIDS. She's also held several important positions positions in the nation and has directed several schemes and ideas in that has improved mental health in maternal mental health, especially in India. She was nominated member of the mission steering group of the National Health Mission Government of India from 2018 to date. She is a member of the Task Force on Suicide Prevention in IITs and NITs under the Ministry of Human Resource Development in 2012 and is currently the chairperson of the Task Force of Perinatal Psychiatry of Indian Psychiatric Society. Dr. Prabha Chandra has several honors and awards, including the Professor Chaini Award, Chaini Kumar Oration Award, the Marseille from the Marseille International Society for Perinatal Psychiatry, Paris. She was given this award in September 2012. She has several ICMR awards, the Dr. Vidyasagar Award of the ICMR for Senior Scientist in Mental Health in 2010, the ICMR award, the Tilak Venkobara Award also. She has delivered several keynote addresses and orations at several international and national conferences. In 2018, she was profiled in the Lancet Psychiatry as a champion for women's mental health. So many credits to Dr. Prabhasini. Several service initiatives have also been started by Dr. Prabha. She started the first mother and baby inpatient psychiatric unit and specialized perinatal psychiatry services in Asia. She has started the NIMHANS Center for Wellbeing and Urban Mental Health Center. She has also engaged with public and in public education meetings several times. She has also been a TEDx speaker in 2009, and the topic she has spoken on is what makes us all predators. There is a YouTube link for that. If we will post it on the chat box for people to access. Like I said, Dr. Prabha needs no introduction, and this is why she needs no introduction. She is so well known and so has achieved so much. Now let us listen to Dr. Prabha's lecture and learn some more. And subsequent to that, if there is anything, we will discuss that. Thank you. Dr. Prabha Chandra, to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Manohari, for that very elaborate introduction. I wish it had been a little shorter. I must, admit and acknowledge that all the achievements have actually been related to my teachers, the teams that I work with, and the patients that I work with. And Manohari has been one of my colleagues in my career. So a lot of the credit goes to groups of women and men working together for the cause. One can't individually do anything. So all the accolades and awards that I have ever got have all been because of who I work with. Thank you, Dr. Ramakrishnan, Dr. Suresh Kumar, Dr. Radhika, Madam Smita, and my dear friend Indumati, who have invited me for this program. I'm also quite honored to see the number of people who've logged in, because, like somebody mentioned, these days, the number of webinars which are going on, there's so much competition. So despite that, so many people have logged in. It's amazing. And I also saw in the audience my beloved teachers, Professor Srinivas Murthy, Professor Mohan Isaac. So I'm extremely a little nervous speaking in front of them, but like I said, they've all been part of my growth. And Samanvi is such a wonderful initiative that, I've been following what you've been doing. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there in the Dr. Sharda Menon's function because it was on Women's Day and there was an IPS program at the same time. I would have loved to be there, and I spoke to Dr. Sharda Menon after that because she's been one of my mentors and role models since my early childhood, actually. Having said that, I think today's talk, like Dr. Ramakrishnan mentioned, is something which is very close to my heart, and something that I think we have not talked about very much in our country in the way that it should be talked about. So most of us as mental health professionals focus a lot on postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, the medications, the pharmacology. But I'm going to go a little beyond that. I probably will not speak on those which are available, in sort of common knowledge. I'm going to talk a little bit about what has fascinated me for the last 10 years. And that is the title of my talk, that everything we are as we grow up as adults is actually determined in the first 9 months of our lives in the womb, and maybe just a little bit before that. So that is the reason why the title of the talk, and it's been inspired by certain scientists who've been working in this field, and which motivated me to then take up a fellowship in the University of Liverpool in the UK, where this work is being done. Following which I was very fortunate to have got a grant, a huge grant actually, of the first time in India where we are following up mothers from the first trimester. And now you'll be glad to know that the children are all 6 years old. And we've got a grant to continue seeing these children till they're 7 years old. So it's almost an 8-year cohort where we have very detailed mental health assessments as well as biological samples, which help us in understanding so much about the science of maternal mental health, in addition to all the social factors that are there. So having said that, I've been kind of immersed myself in this work, and I'd like to present some of what is available in the world literature and some little bit of findings that we have got as well, and how the future should look, and what should policymakers, mental health professionals, public health people actually think of doing. So I'm going to share my slides. I must also say that, like Dr. Ramakrishnan mentioned, one of the things that we have been doing is educating obstetricians, auxiliary nurse midwives, ASHA workers, community health workers, pediatricians in the field of maternal mental health. Because I don't think the psychiatrists really see maternal mental health as much as people who are in the front line. So it's really nice that just about an hour back, I have finished a workshop with obstetricians. We are trying to train through obstetric societies nearly 1,000 obstetricians across the country. We started this work when COVID began. I'm really pleased to say that the obstetricians have really taken on this program quite well, particularly the RCOG of India, which is coming forward, and I just finished training, and they're coming again tomorrow for a 3-hour training. So that's the kind of motivation that obstetricians have, that they're coming on a Sunday to Saturday and Sunday to learn about mental health. So I think this is what is something that all of us should actually be doing, reaching out to our other colleagues as well, not just educating ourselves on this. I'll just try make sure that my slides are seen. Okay. Okay, are my slides seen? Everything perfect? Okay, great.
Yes,
so I'm going to talk about the fact that life needs to be understood backwards and the relevance of maternal mental health for society. So as somebody who's been advising the government through the Steering Committee of National Health Mission about maternal mental health, it's very important for us to even talk to policymakers and public health professionals about why is maternal mental health important for society. It's not just the woman, it's not just the immediate family, but we are talking about a much larger impact of maternal mental health. So some of the questions that I'd like to answer are what is fetal programming, this new concept of fetal programming, and what is the role of stress in pregnancy and child outcomes. I'm going to talk about how does stress in the mother reach the womb. So what happens? How, if a mother is stressed, how is the baby going to get affected? What is the science of it? I'm going to talk a little bit about maternal programming. What is the impact of maternal mental health after the baby is born on infant brain and behavior? And then what is the impact on society? And finally, how can we make a difference? The beautiful picture you can see over here is by an artist called Gustav Klimt from Vienna. And this picture is called Hope, and it's about a woman who's pregnant and the kind of hope that is there. But there is also despair, which looms large in women's lives. So this was a title of a Time magazine many years ago, actually. And it was then called The New Science of Fetal Origins, how the first 9 months shaped the rest of your life. And this was a completely new concept which took over the scientific world in this area by storm, actually, because it was not ever thought that in utero life would make so much of difference to the rest of one's life, and the whole field of fetal programming. So there is a movement called the Developmental Origins of Health and Disease. which was started by somebody called Barker, who is a very famous scientist from Oxford, who started talking about the fact that a lot of what happens to us as adults are diabetes, hypertension, cancers, depression, schizophrenia. Much of this is actually determined within the first 9 months of a life. A lot of things happen in one's 9 months of life that actually shape the rest of our life. And that is the whole field of developmental origins of health and disease. It's called DOHARD. It has a society and it's a very active research group. So this is called the Barker hypothesis. And Barker, what he found was he actually started working backwards. He had this big cohort and he looked at people when they were 45, 50 years old. And he then traced back their records and found that people who developed diabetes and hypertension later in life were actually having low birth weight and poor nutrition at the time of birth. So that's how he started looking at this whole area. And he recognized that how do we build stronger and healthier people in this world? And he said by improving the nutrition of babies in the womb, not only after they were born. And what he said was very, very important, that the greatest gift we could give to the next generation is to improve the nutrition and growth of girls and young women, which means he's not just talking about improving the health of women once they become pregnant. He's talking about the fact that we need to actually improve the health of girls even before they get married, before they decide to become pregnant, because as potential mothers, it is very important for us to take care of their nutrition. Now, Barker is still very active, and after he started talking about nutrition and diabetes and hypertension and metabolic problems, it was recognized that even mental health problems had their basis in the womb, and Barker started then looking at much bigger cohorts where he started focusing on depression, autism, ADHD. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of antenatal maternal stress, anxiety, and depression on the fetus and later on the child. So what is fetal programming? Fetal programming basically means that environment in the uterus during different critical periods for specific outcomes can alter the development of the fetus with a permanent effect on the child. So we know that the fetus goes from a zygote to a full-blown baby. And for as psychiatrists, as mental health professionals, we are very interested in the brain. So there seem to be critical periods in a fetus's life when the impact of maternal stress can influence different parts of the brain. You'll be surprised to know that there have been fMRI studies, which have been imaging studies, brain imaging studies, which have been done on the fetus and immediately after the birth, and have looked at the relationship of stress to the brain structures. And what they find is that there seem to be critical periods for specific outcomes. For example, if there is a lot of stress, or if there is infection, or if there's inflammation in the early part, in the first trimester, then one of the outcomes, of course, as we all know, is schizophrenia. Much later is a little later in the first trimester, the chances of autism. Much later in the third trimester, in the second trimester, chances of ADHD. What has also been seen is that these children, when they grow up, the impact of this is there till the age of 15, 16, 17. And adolescent depression is more in mothers who have depression. Now, you might say that that might be because mothers who are depressed are postnatally depressed, so they don't look after the babies very well. They probably have chronic depression, so they don't look after the adolescents well. Maybe it is the father's mental health. Maybe it's substance use in the family. Maybe it's violence. But what I'd like to mention is that the cohort studies which have been doing, so there are a lot of cohorts which are going on in the country, in the world right now. And what they have found is that even if you control for postnatal depression, even if you control for substance use in the father, even if you control for family violence, poor parenting, psychopathology in parents, nutrition, the fact that independent of all that, controlled of all that, prenatal stress seems to have an impact on mental health even in adulthood. So it's a very important finding which has come from very large cohorts, and that is why the emphasis. So like I mentioned earlier, what has been shown is that stress in the prenatal period can lead to anxiety and depression, schizophrenia. Now, it's not a direct causation, but these have been related. Autism, much more robust evidence for ADHD, conduct disorder, anxiety disorders, and impaired cognitive development. So what are the kinds of antenatal stress? I think we must remember that when we talk about antenatal stress, we're not only talking about anxiety and depression like we as psychiatrists understand. It has actually been seen that there's like a U-shaped curve almost, that some amount of stress, mild stress, seems to be actually good for the fetus. Now what happens is when the fetus is in the womb, if there is a lot of stress in the uterus, the fetus learns to adapt itself in some way or the other. And that is why mothers who have depression or anxiety or a lot of stress, they find that the birth weight of those babies is low. And that's because they don't want to conserve too much of the energy and become smaller so that they can cope with the environment better. But this small birth weight is good when they're in the uterus, but when they come out, it makes them prone to other problems. Partner or family discord. Dr. Ramakrishnan mentioned this, that, you know, in earlier days, we used to look after our mothers very well and, you know, they were taken care of. Obviously, all of this is when we're talking about normative families, families where everything seems to be all right. But we know as mental health professionals that that's not the norm. The norm is that even from a long, long time back, suicide rates we know in the mothers have been high for a long time. Postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis are not new entities. They have been there for a long time. If in the Nimhans museum, which Dr. Pratima and Dr. Sanjeev Jain have so beautifully assembled together, we actually have a series of women with postpartum depression and psychosis from 50 years back. And if you look at the symptoms and signs, they are very similar to what we have now. So this is not a new issue. And so one must remember that any kind of stress can actually impact the fetus. Partner or family discord. We have found that intimate partner violence seems to be one of the strongest risk factors for maternal suicide, for low birth weight, as well as for maternal depression, of course. Life events, particularly negative life events like loss and grief. And I think COVID gives us a good opportunity to again look at this whole area of trauma and grief in pregnancy. We now have finished 2 studies. One is a multicentric study from across the country, from through the IPS, where we interviewed 600 mothers who were pregnant during the COVID pandemic. So we have data from Raipur, Uttarakhand, Orissa, and Delhi. And what we have found is that the rates of anxiety and depression seem to be higher during the COVID pandemic compared to earlier. We have also now analyzing along with my colleagues from obstetric colleagues from Southeastern Hospital in Delhi, where the maximum impact of COVID was, and my young colleague, Dr. Sachin, we've just analyzed the data on anxiety and depression in women who had COVID, who were diagnosed to have COVID infection when they came for labor. So can you imagine the kind of stress, very acute stress, which they went through. Now, it'll be very important, in addition to understanding the mental health of mothers, to try and follow up these children, because not only did they handle the stress of the mother, there were other immune mechanisms which were happening inside the body and at the time that they were in utero. So I think these events actually give scientists a great opportunity to study the impact of prenatal stress under different circumstances and to follow up what happens to these kids. Acute disasters. Unfortunately, we don't have data from tsunami or from floods about what happened to these babies, but we have data from some other disasters. One is the 9/11 disaster. It was very interesting that after 9/11, a lot of work on trauma happened. And what they found was that the mothers who were pregnant with babies at that point, depending on how far they were from the World Trade Center, those babies, the impact of this disaster was different. So these were not mothers who were in the towers or anything. They were not physically affected, but the emotional trauma. So the ones who were further away did not have as much problems in cognitive development as the babies who were born, where the mothers lived nearer the World Trade Center. So this kind of indicated to us that the immense stress that happened because of the World Trade Center, the Twin Tower disaster, had an impact on the babies when they were in utero, indicating that there needs to be good interventions when disasters like this happens, specifically towards pregnant mothers. In Kerala, when the floods happened 2 years back, many obstetricians actually with great awareness called us up and said, what can we do for pregnant mothers so that we can decrease the impact that the stress is happening because of the flooding? Now, this is the kind of awareness that we need to build to prevent downstream effects of these babies, because we never think, we only think of the physical safety of these babies and the mothers. We do not think the amount of stress that can impact the infants. This was a ice storm which was there in Quebec, in Canada, and what they found that, and this was like a long power shutdown. Things became quite chaotic, and this was in the 90s. And the good part is that in the West, people immediately start thinking of research plans, thinking of research ideas. Like science needs to be thinking of these in these creative ways. So what they did was that they decided that this was a good natural opportunity for us to look at extreme stress and look at what impact it had on the infant development. And what they found that children who were exposed in utero to high levels of objective stress had lower language abilities compared to children exposed to low or moderate levels of prenatal maternal stress. So in the COVID context, for example, if a mother has gone through the COVID infection, has already also lost somebody's passed away in her near family, she struggled to get a bed. Now, all of this could have caused immense stress, as opposed to somebody who had COVID but got a good care and recovered from it. So I think we need to start thinking about these ways of understanding, research in prenatal stress, because it will give us very good models to develop preventive efforts. So I'd like to give some data from what is called the ALSPAC studies, and this is the children of the 90s. And most of the children now are 45 years old or so. This is a large prospective birth cohort called the A1 longitudinal study, which was an inspiration for the Bangalore Child Health and Development Study. This was recruited in Bristol in 1990. So as you can imagine, these kids have really grown up now. And they have detailed information on children at 4, 7, 11, and 15 years. And the prenatal data as well. So let's see what they found. So they studied child behavior at 4 and 7 years of age. They looked at attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, anxiety and depression, and conduct disorder. And they controlled for a whole range of things. So, when you say, oh, prenatal stress has caused something, there are obviously many confounders. There's maternal age, there's birth weight, there's gestational age, smoking in mothers, passive smoking in fathers, alcohol use, crowding, noise, maternal education, as well as postnatal depression and anxiety. And like I mentioned earlier, what the ALSPAC did was, in a very beautifully, good analytical manner, control for all these confounders. And let's see what they found. So what they found was that, so if you look at these graphs, so at 7 years, behavioral and emotional problems and maternal anxiety at 32 weeks. So when, let's go back here. Yeah, so these are basically odds ratios of boys and girls, and the mothers had anxiety at 32 weeks. And what they found was that when mothers had anxiety, the odds of boys being hyperactive, having a conduct disorder, having an emotional problem, and the girls having hyperactivity, conduct, and emotional disorders were much higher than those who did not, than the babies of mothers who did not have anxiety. So even at 32 weeks, when you measure this, it indicates that nearly twice, 1.6 times, twice again, and overall slightly, nearly 2.2 times the fact, and the slight difference between how girls respond and how boys respond. It has been seen that internalizing problems like anxiety seem to be more in girls, and externalizing problems seem to be more in boys. Okay, so then what they did was they looked at antenatal anxiety, that women who had severe anxiety, 15%, top 15% scores, and the rest of the babies at 32 weeks, and child emotional problems at 5 years, 7 years, 11 years, and 14 years, as you can see over here. And if you look at this graph, mothers who had high anxiety at 32 weeks had, these girls had higher rates of emotional difficulties. If you look at the boys, again, higher rates. So these are the lower rates, these are the higher rates. So mothers who had lower anxiety, the rates of emotional difficulties were lower in the babies, in the kids, and mothers who had higher anxiety in the prenatal period, the rates were higher, indicating that the impact, independent of all the other factors that can be buffers or scaffolding, can lead to emotional problems later. Similar results for ADHD. Here you can see, interestingly, that in the previous graph, you see that the girls had higher emotional problems. In this graph, you can see that the boys have higher ADHD. So the rates of ADHD seem to be higher compared in boys compared to girls. Again, all the way up to 14. So look at this gap. So girls, mothers who had less anxiety, mothers who had more anxiety, children. Look at the gap between the two, quite a lot, indicating that definitely this appears to be a risk factor. Similarly related to child conduct problems. Then they looked at the Bayley's mental development scores and looked at life events. So another thing, like I mentioned to you, is grief, loss, negative life events when a woman is pregnant. Now this is independent. You can't predict life events. Things can happen, right? So, and in our Bangalore Child Health and Development study, we are actually measuring life events in great detail to see how many life events happen in a pregnant woman's 9 months and what impact does it have on depression. And we found that life events seem to predict postpartum depression and antepartum depression also. So here what they found was that women who had less than 3 life events and more than 3 life events, if you looked at the children at 18 months and did the Bayley's mental development score, you found that mothers who had higher life events, the Bayley's mental development score at 18 months was significantly lower than the other kids. Again, indicating that prenatal stress due to life events seems to have a role. Finally, I would like to talk a little bit about relationship problems in pregnancy. Dr. Ramakrishnan referred to that. And I think it's very important, again, when Bayley's was done in mothers who had problems with and without relationship problems. So here it's mothers without relationship problems, here mothers with relationship problems in pregnancy. Again, like you can see, sorry. My slides are very enthusiastic. Again, as you can see that development seems to be determined by relationship problems. Then we looked at placental weight. So they looked at anxiety in mothers and weighed the placenta. There are some studies going on in Delhi right now where they are actually again examining the placenta. We have not examined the placenta, but what the ALSPAC found was that when anxiety was high, as you can see here, that the placental weight was lower in mothers whose anxiety rates, anxiety scores were higher. So why does all this happen? What is the science behind this? Why does maternal mental health affect, placenta? Why does it affect the babies? Why does it cause problems? I don't think we still have the answers because it's a very complex science. There are multiple factors, but we have some idea. So I will just share with you what we know already. So how does maternal stress affect the fetal brain? There is an enzyme in the brain, in the placenta, called the 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. This is an enzyme which is available in the placenta. Now, normally you know that pregnancy is a high cortisol state. The cortisol levels are quite high, serum cortisol. But cortisol is not good for the fetal brain because it can damage the hippocampus, it can damage the amygdala, it can change the neurons. So what this beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase does, it's on top of the placenta. It prevents the cortisol from entering into the fetal brain. Now, what happens when there is stress is there is increased placental permeability to cortisol. So the dehydrogenase gets down-regulated. It stops functioning. Excessive cortisol enters the baby's brain, the fetus brain. And in addition, the placenta also secretes some corticotropin release hormone. There seem to be also immune mechanisms which happen because of this condition. We know that there are a lot of immune changes in pregnancy because of which you get preeclamptic toxemia, you get other autoimmune conditions are suppressed. So there are some immune mechanisms. So if you look at this graph, this figure over here, here is the mother. Here is that hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. Here is fetal cortisol. So when there is a lot of, so between the mother and the fetus is your placenta. But what happens is when stress increases, this placenta becomes ineffective. And that fetal cortisol increases. There is alteration of the fetal hippocampus and the hypothalamo-pituitary axis. And because of that, there is a change in the newborn HPA function. Now, we all know that the HPA function is very important for emotional regulation, for autoimmune conditions, but as psychiatrists, it's very important for emotions, particularly self-soothing, managing emotions. And as a result, this seems to be the impact on the fetal brain. Like I told you, this is a simplistic model. Probably there are many other things which happen, but many studies have looked at this. We have also measured maternal cortisol at the late second trimester and are trying to relate it to our babies and seeing whether there is a relationship between maternal cortisol and the infant behavior. We're still analyzing the data. We don't have answers, but my sense is that this is what we may get as well. So some of the pathways which have been proposed include that one, of course, like I said, prenatal depression acts through cortisol, but it also acts through sympathetic nervous system, which results in decreased uteroplacental blood flow. There is a heritability in HPA axis functioning. I'll talk about it later. Mothers may have lower levels of health seeking if they are depressed. Mothers may continue to have depression in the postnatal period, and mothers may have lower nutrition or unhealthy nutrition. So there may be many ways in which depression can impact fetus, direct and indirect. Now, having said all this, I just want to discuss about, so what do we do if there is prenatal stress and it happens, like COVID happens? Now, you can't do anything about that. One of the things which has been found is that sensitive early mothering can reverse some of the effects of antenatal stress. And that is where all of us come in as family members, as professionals, as public health professionals, social workers, that focusing on sensitive early mothering, which can, even if there has been antenatal stress, to kind of learn to help the mother to manage the stress better. So what is sensitive mothering? And this is something that my team has been working on. And some of my team members have joined me today in I just saw their names. So I'm happy that they're there because like I told you earlier, the research is not very easy in such a very, very minute methods of research we are doing. So what is sensitive mothering? Sensitive mothering is the ability of the mother to understand an infant's emotional state. Now, we all think that the baby is just needs to be fed and cleaned and put to sleep, but it's much, much more than that. A lot of the development of a baby actually happens in the first 2 years of their life. And we know we talk about the 1001 critical days now. What are the 1001 critical days? It is 9 months in the womb, 360 days, and 2 years after that. So everything that happens is in the 1001 critical days. And that is the reason why we pay attention to the first 360 days in the womb, but we also then talk about what happens to the baby immediately. Babies they have a lot of physiological changes in themselves. They need to regulate their emotions. You may have seen when there's a big noise, the baby will go like this and then change itself. If there is a lot of emotion, or something is happening in the environment, parents are fighting, it has been seen that the babies will start drooling. So very, very early on, the baby responds to what is happening in the environment. And sensitive mothering basically involves the ability of the mother, or indeed any caregiver, doesn't have to be mother, it could be a grandmother or a grandfather, to understand an infant's emotional state, rapidly respond to it, and restore regulation and help the infant to manage its negative emotions. Now, if a mother has depression, then she's not able to do this. So this baby has had impact in the fetus, and then when it is born, because the mother has depression or anxiety, she's not able to manage this baby's emotions very well. And that is where the role of the extended family comes in. So what are we doing in our Bangalore Child Health and Development study is that we are actually doing videos of mothers and infants. And we have nearly 400 odd videos of mothers and infants for 14-minute periods to meticulously assess maternal sensitivity. And we're trying to relate that to the mother's prenatal stress as well as the postnatal depression and anxiety scores, and trying to see what is the relationship of maternal sensitivity to her own mental state, and what is going to happen to babies whose mothers were not very sensitive later on in life. So this is a very important part of understanding why my title says that life needs to be understood backwards, because we have moved from prenatal to immediate postnatal, and this period becomes as important as earlier. So we are not new in saying this. John Bowlby talked about this very, very early on. He said that the quality of early experiences in relationship with caregivers and the experience of separation and loss of those relationships shapes the development of the self and the quality of later relationships. So it's very important that this period be taken extremely seriously for mothers, not just those with very severe depression or the kinds who come to us, but for any mother. And that is another reason why mothers who are very young, adolescent mothers who have unplanned pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies. We know that 80% of pregnancies in India are not planned, and many of them the girls don't really want, or the women don't really want. It just happens because they have no control over their contraception or having a child. So as a result, I think it's extremely important for us to pay attention to when should a woman decide to become a mother? Is she ready to become a mother? Because these things are extremely important. The other thing I want to emphasize, which is a big advantage in our country, is the fact that we have a lot of alternate caregivers. This advantage is not available in the Western countries. So all this research that we are seeing, and I've talked about ALSPAC and others, have been done in countries where the mother and the father are the primary caregivers. Invariably, it's the mother. Whereas in our country, we have grandfather, grandmother, aunts, uncles, many people who are part of the caregiving environment. So what difference does it make? So one of the things that we are studying in the Bangalore Child Health and Development cohort is looking at how many alternate caregivers does this baby have. So we meticulously record who is the alternate caregiver. Is it the maternal grandmother? Is it the paternal grandmother? Is there a shift between maternal grandmother to paternal grandmother? What happens? Like we know that in our country, most of the time the babies are with the maternal grandmother till 6 months of age or 8 months of age. And then the mother goes from the maternal home to the husband's home, and there the paternal grandmother takes over. What difference does that make to the baby? Because there is a change from one caregiver to another. Does it make a difference? Does it not make a difference? Is it enough for soothing to happen by any caregiver? I think these are some questions, the protection that this kind of environment offers, and whether our babies, because one of the problems with our babies is that we have problems in nutrition. So that is a risk factor. But is the shared caregiving environment a protective factor? That's another thing that we are trying to study, which has never been studied in anywhere else in the world with such meticulousness. So sensitivity also depends on issues like gender preference. So one of the things that we are looking at is, does this family want a girl child or a boy child? Was there a lot of pressure on the mother to have a boy child? How does that make a difference to maternal sensitivity? So I think these are some of the things that we are trying to examine. And right now we don't have the answers, except to say that maternal sensitivity is very important for self-soothing of the baby. So just to give you an idea about what happens with babies. So there's something called a proto-conversation which happens with infants. There's something called a mutual attention. You look at each other. It's like a dance. There's a shared positive feeling between mother and baby. It's a well-coordinated non-verbal duet. And there's a lot of synchronization. So this synchronization is extremely important for the mother and for the baby. Now, when there is depression or anxiety, or the mother is very stressed, or she's facing violence, or she's facing anger from the in-laws for having a third female child, all of this can go haywire. And that is going to affect not just the mother, but also the infant. So if proto-conversation goes all right, what happens is that the mother may pay little attention or responds without enthusiasm, so the baby may withdraw. The mother's responses are poorly timed, so she doesn't know, she doesn't have sensitivity. When the baby doesn't want, she picks up the baby. When the baby wants, she's not looking after the baby because she's so preoccupied with what is happening in herself. As you can see, the baby is looking puzzled. The baby doesn't know what's going on. Baby becomes distressed because it is ill-timed. And then because the baby is not responding, the mother starts feeling helpless and upset, and this cycle goes on. So I think that is where all of us come in to make sure that we provide that kind of security to this little infant. And to do that, we need to ensure that we pay attention to our families. Australia, for example, has a lot of programs on early parenting. And they start preparing parents even when the mothers and fathers are pregnant, to try and make them understand what is security, what is secure attachment. And I think we really need to focus on some of these if we want to prevent further problems. I also want to talk a little bit about trauma, because it's something that we don't really talk about. So we talk a lot about depression, anxiety. And the reason I'm bringing it, because Samanvi is very focused on trauma. It's focusing on rape. It's focusing on intimate partner violence. It's focusing on sexual abuse. Now, what we have found is that the impact of maternal trauma can be both on the mother and the infant. Impact on mother, higher rates of maternal depression, more severe psychopathology, and poorer mother-infant bonding. It's been seen that directly, if a mother has gone through a lot of traumatic events, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, bullying, gender discrimination in childhood, then the impact of that trauma is present in the mother and in the baby. And there is impact on infant, which is on child development, and a completely new area of research, which is called the intergenerational transmission of risk. Just to give you an idea about the level to which science has gone on, what they have found is, like, let's say my mother went through trauma and her mother went through trauma. There are epigenetic changes which can be transmitted from my grandmother to my mother to me to my daughter to her child. And a lot of the parenting problems that you can see can be transgenerational because of epigenetic changes of severe trauma. And this has been demonstrated both in animal models and to some extent in human beings also. Very, very advanced studies, but indicating again why handling trauma and the kind of work that, you know, Smita ma'am is doing is so important, because we really need to focus on some of these issues. So there can be betrayal trauma, the trauma of sexual abuse in childhood. There can be undesired pregnancy and violation. We all know that marital rape in India is not an offense, but there is violation which can happen. So the child may have been begotten because of that kind of trauma. There is trauma related to gender disadvantage. In many families in India, girls are put down because of their gender. All of this is trauma, and all of this can have, you know, impact. So that is why when Barker said that we have to pay attention to girls and young women, it's not only after they become pregnant that we shower them with love and care and milk and badam and, you know, look after them. It is even much earlier that we need to look after mothers if we want to ensure that society has healthy children and healthy adults. This is some data from our cohort. We looked at lifetime traumatic experiences and postpartum depression in our cohort. And we have created a new trauma interview, which is called the Indian Interpersonal Trauma Interview for women in the perinatal period. The reason why we did that was that in India, there are culture-specific traumatic events. I'm sure in Africa also there are culture-specific traumatic events like female genital mutilation. And in Australia, there may be others, or in America, there may be others like racism. But in India, we found that in addition to the standard trauma events, women have had body shaming, about skin complexion, gender discrimination and harassment, culture-specific traumatic events such as experiencing repeated rejection by suitors in arranged marriage. What impact does that have on the mother just before she gets married and becomes pregnant? Dowry harassment, separation from natal family. Now, this is a uniquely cultural issue that in India, the moment a girl gets married, she's plucked from her natal family and put to an in-laws family, and at 22 years of age, expected to completely adjust to a new family with a completely different environment, regardless of anything. So there is loss. And in fact, people have written about the separation of the girl from her own mother at 22 years of age and sending her to a completely alien environment. She becomes pregnant invariably within the first year or first 2 years. Now, all of that trauma is happening and we are not paying any attention to that. So I think it's extremely important to do that. And when we looked at our data, we found that rates of trauma were pretty high in mothers of various kinds, which are very culture specific. And these mothers were then at higher risk for developing postpartum depressive symptoms. So there are some unanswered questions. It appears that anxiety rather than depression appears to have a greater effect on the fetus. Why do these effects occur across the range of stress from moderate to extreme, and are not just because of toxic or very high stress? So they seem to occur even with normal amounts of stress. Why are internalizing symptoms like anxiety and ADHD more common than others? Why are different children affected in different ways? Why are males affected in different ways from females? These are some questions we still don't have complete answers to, but science is, a lot of labs across the world are trying to answer these questions, because if we answer these questions, then we can have more preventative methods. Now, why are we talking about all this? It's because in most Western countries, screening of mothers in the antenatal period for mental health issues has become a norm. In India, it is still not a norm. In most Western countries, it's become part of routine practice that every mother who comes into the antenatal setting will have at least 2 assessments of mental health in the pregnancy, and at 3 months and 6 months and 1 year after that. It's become a routine thing, but it's not so in our country. The only state which has done it is Kerala, and the credit, of course, as everything else these days goes to Shailaja teacher madam, who really has taken a lot of initiative in this area. Madam Shailaja teacher came to NIMHANS, she saw a mother baby unit, and she said, no, I want to do something like this in Kerala. And just before COVID, she actually initiated and launched the Amma Manasu program in Kerala, where actually this has been integrated into the district mental health program, and Dr. Anil Kumar from Trivandrum Medical College is spearheading it along with the DMHP team and the obstetrician. So that is Chhattisgarh is another area which is trying to do it. Karnataka also is trying to develop the program. So I think it's very important that all states develop this program and develop a method by which they can integrate mental health into routine maternal care. I discussed this, why a woman's own parenting and transgenerational trauma experience is important, and the role of epigenetics. Okay, let's talk about the father now, because they must be all feeling a little neglected. What is the father's role? I think the father's role is important as the mother's, but it's slightly different. There is some data to indicate that paternal depression may also have a role in not the fetus so much, but the infant subsequently. And sensitive play with the father is associated with security of attachment. So I think involving the fathers much more than what is culturally done in India. In middle class families, yes, fathers are very involved, but the kind of families that I'm working with, which are in low-income areas, the father is not even there in the antenatal clinic. The obstetrician does not see the father at all, or the A&M doesn't see the father at all. So I think much more involvement of the father to ensure that this happens. I've mentioned some of this, readiness for parenting, involving the father and the family. And I think the family and father need to know why the mental health is so important, you know, for the mother and for the baby. If they don't know, then they will think that the mother is squealing on them. Because one of the reasons why mothers don't tell us about their depression or their anxiety or stress is they feel that it's a family issue. Ghar ki baat, we shouldn't tell outside. You know, if there is partner violence, we shouldn't talk about it. It's a family secret. They need to know, they need to understand that talking about it will get them some help and how it is going to help everybody else. Simple interventions. We found that a lot of our fathers were smoking at home. Now with smoking being banned outside in public places, what is happening is a lot of men are smoking inside the home. We know that secondhand smoke exposure during pregnancy has a lot of impact on the baby, but nobody's addressing it. In fact, our antenatal card does not have, are you exposed to secondhand smoke in the house? It doesn't have that. We developed an intervention where we targeted the father. We made a little booklet where the unborn baby is talking to the father and saying, "Daddy, you know, because you smoke, I start coughing inside my mother's womb. I want to come out healthy. Please stop smoking." And we found that the fathers were actually responding. They started crying and they said, "Okay, we will stop smoking." So interventions which involve the father are very important. They should not be left out of the picture, which is what is the sort of cultural norm in usual situations. This is some brief about the Bangalore Child Health and Development Study. I've told you a lot of things that we are looking at. We are also looking at gene and environment and and we take saliva samples from the babies at 1 and 2 years of age to see what is the relationship between gene and environment. And we hope that this study is going to actually bring out a lot of information for the Indian population. This is my team and who goes to the various, so this is the antenatal clinic. We go to homes and do infant assessments. We're doing the Baileys. We do anthropometry. We do a lot of maternal assessments. If you can see downstairs, down here, you can see that the mother and baby infant video is being done. So there's a standard protocol. We give toys to the mother and ask her to play with the baby and record it and then rate it for sensitivity. We do different kinds of assessments with the mother. So I think these are all things that are very comprehensively done, and we hope that they will give the answers, the kind of answers that ALSPAC has given in the UK, but these are uniquely Indian, and that is why they're even more important. I just could not resist showing you this paper which has just come out like 1 week ago from our cohort, where we found that anxiety and depressive symptoms in pregnancy predicted low birth weight differentially in male and female infants. So for female infants, the first trimester and the second trimester anxiety seemed to make a lot of difference in causing low birth weight. For the male infants, it was more change in second and third trimester. And another important finding that we had was that partner violence was a strong predictor of low birth weight. So this is the kind of data which is very important for policymakers also to understand that how, if there, and we know if there is low birth weight, there is going to be problems later. So this is an important finding which is, I think, needs to be talked about. There are some myths which I would like to end with, that pregnancy is a happy time and pregnant women don't get depressed. That's a myth. It's just baby blues, I'm fine. Mothers often tell themselves that it's something mild, but it may be something more serious. Mothers think that if they are diagnosed with a mental health issue, somebody will take the baby away. That's not true. You know, we try to keep the mother and baby as much as possible together. If I tell anyone about my mental health worries, they will think I'm a failure or a bad parent. This is again another something that a lot of mothers think, that they should be happy and joyful. How can they ever say that I don't want to look after my baby? I don't want to care for my baby. It's not acceptable, so they hide it. This is of course very common about medication. I'm the only one who feels this way. And finally, that only mothers suffer from mental health issues like postnatal depression. Fathers are also known to have, postnatal depression. So these are some myths that all of us should actually try to discount. I want to sort of talk a little bit about Supraja, which is the protocol for maternal care in Ayurveda, and it's called Garbh Sanskar. There are things in our traditions which actually talk about how to take care of a mother when she's pregnant, or rituals. However, these seem to be much more about positive mental health and about good music, listening to nice tinkling of bangles, chanting some shlokas, the kind of food mother should eat. There is not enough on negative mental health. But I think these are things which are available in traditions, so which we must follow. Finally, for any policymaker, we need to talk about costs. And I think as mental health professionals, we need to start talking to policymakers, not just sitting in our clinics and treating our patients. But when we want funding for something, we need to tell them why it is important to do something. So this was a mathematical model which came out 2 years back from the US. And what they found was that untreated perinatal mood and anxiety disorders have multi-generational consequences, like I mentioned, and they cause so many things. They cause higher absenteeism in the mother, lower labor force participation, suicide, more obstetric care is required for the child. There are so many other things that can happen. And then as a result, income loss, reduced economic output, increased use of public sector services, increased healthcare costs. So I think, our country knows that. Our country knows that looking after anemia is very important for mothers, for the child. But our country still doesn't know that looking after maternal mental health is important. I want to end with James Heckman. James Heckman is a Nobel laureate in economics, and he comes from the University of Chicago. And what he talked about was about early childhood development as a smart investment. And if you look at the investment, so if you intervene early, prenatally, the costs. So if you look at rate of return to investment human capital, if you intervene in prenatal programs, the returns are maximum. So as the person grows older, the costs become less. So if you have people with developmental problems, if you have people with ADHD, if you have people with internalizing problems or conduct problems, if you start the interventions late in school or post-school, the economic returns are not as much as if you start your programs prenatally. That is the reason why many of these countries have started focusing much, much more on prenatal mental health of women and general prenatal programs. So I think this is something that we must always remember, that not just early childhood development, but prenatal childhood development is a very smart investment as families as well as societies. And that is the reason why I want to emphasize that. So the history of man or woman for the 9 months preceding his or her birth would probably be far more interesting and contain events of greater moment than all the 10 years that follow it, was what Samuel Taylor Coleridge said. And I'm sure after the talk that I've given you, you're kind of convinced that I think today what we are probably because how our mums were in the first 9 months of our lives and maybe a little earlier. And we attribute all our strengths and our weaknesses to what happened during those first 9 months of our life. So thank you very much. This is my team. The team here on the left is my team from NIMHANS, which is the mother-baby unit. All the nurses, doctors, psychologists, we're a big multidisciplinary team, and all the work that I do is related to that. We are saying gracias here because a Spanish group actually gave us some money for the mother-baby unit. So we sent out a gracias to them. This is my UK India research team. You can recognize Dr. Shobha Srinath there. Many of these are top researchers from the UK, and my research team is is a fantastic team which is doing very good work. And we hope to give you many, many more findings in the next few years in this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prabha, for that most scholarly lecture. I think all of us have learned several more things today than we would have if we had sat and read for a month. I think you have provided scientific evidence for all the old age adages about how to look after women who are pregnant and the importance of looking after girls. I think that scientific evidence is resounding, and the way in which you have expressed the way in which you have pointed it out to us has been most enlightening for all of us. Just few more things that I would like to ask you before we open the session for other people's questions and comments. Poverty and the growth of the girl child, things that we can do. Often if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then the psychological needs and all the other issues are not met at all. From an individual perspective, from individual, what an individual can do to help this aspect, what would be your thoughts and comments, Dr. Prabha?
Thank you, Dr. Manori. I think that's such a great question. And like I mentioned earlier, there's not much point starting to work only once a mother becomes a woman becomes a mother. I think the work needs to start right from adolescence. We did a study called the MOGU study, which was called the Mental Health of Girls Growing Up. And MOGU in Kannada is a flower bud. So basically it was kind of indicating a flower bud becoming a flower. And we asked young girls what was impacting their mental health. And the kind of things they talked about was, of course, a lot of problems such as gender discrimination was probably topping the list in the family, not being given opportunities, watching parents having conflicts, shyness, inability to manage their anger, inability to negotiate conflict with each other, feeling how to manage sadness. I think these were the kind of things that the girls themselves brought out. How to manage if you are not able to study very well, how do you feel better about yourself? How do you feel better about your body image? So, and when we asked the girls what kind of intervention they wanted, they said we want something that we can do for each other. So I think adolescents and young people like to learn from each other. So the focus needs to be on more peer group kind of support and education and giving them tools. So what we did was we created a storybook to help them learn through stories rather than through some preachy lecture kind of a model. And the girls seem to really enjoy that. And that book actually has now been translated into several languages, because it helps the girls, through stories talk to each other about very difficult topics. Like eve teasing. What do you do when a boy follows you when you're going home in the night and you're petrified? I mean, these things that I think we don't really pay attention to. As once we grow older, we are not paying enough attention to what might have happened to us when we were younger. So I think it's a very important topic. The government has the Rashtriya Kishore program, and one hopes that mental health will get a better impetus in that program, because even though there is youth counseling and adolescent counseling, the focus on mental health has not been adequate in that program. So I think what you've raised is a very, very important thing. There are multiple issues. And now, so the other one was about gadget addiction and gadget use. That's become a huge issue in adolescence and a huge reason for fights between parent and the adolescent. There is good in it and there is bad in it. So I think these are some of the things that we need to probably focus on much more, and especially girls who've probably gone through a lot of bullying and abuse in childhood. They will need more attention. So I think if you look at trajectories, there are adolescents who are probably managing fairly optimally. Some are little suboptimal and some are really below. And I think if we have small amount of resources, focusing on the girls who are not coping very well in the beginning would be very, very important.
Thank you, Dr. Prabha, for that so lucid explanation. Probably one more thing, apart from the body shaming, the complexion of the girl child also is emphasized so much that
Absolutely.
They have a lot of trauma because of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Prabha. I think you're a true blue-blooded feminist, and this is how a feminist needs to be. And the research and the work that you're doing really underlines that women need to be looked after and women need to be empowered. And all that you're doing says that. Thank you, ma'am. I will hand over the proceedings to Dr. Smita and Dr. Indumati and Dr.
There seem to
Radhika
be
for
quite a few,
questions.
there seem to be quite
for
a
the
few questions which
Yeah.
need to be.
Dr. Ramakrishnan, I'd like to share one or two things. It is a wonderful talk for the people who attended. Till now, 181 people are listening to your voices. This is a very great one, madam. From the historical point of view, about this pre-birth and early pregnancy, Prahalada, when he was in womb, Narada used to guard the preachings to her mother, Om Namo Narayana, and he became a staunch Narayana devotee, and you know the story. Like that, Abhimanyu, when he was pregnant, Subhadra, and Arjuna was listening to Krishna how to come out in and out of Chakravyuha. Subhadra was listening when he was teaching when to enter. But she left when Krishna was teaching to Abhiman. Arjuna went to come out. She didn't listen. So in the 13th day of war, he knew how to enter, but he couldn't
Go out.
these things. So that's one thing I thought I will share with you. And I believe from your lecture, we could very much focus, go for clinical practice, why adopted children and orphan children, orphanages. There are more juvenile homes and all, where there is more psychological problems like temperamental issues in adopted children as well as the orphanages. Maybe that is due to maternal trauma even before the delivery, and she was the baby was left into the street like that. And another thing I can understand is I have seen many mania, postpartum mania, or acute psychosis or postpartum psychosis, when the mother knew that the baby is girl. I have given birth to a girl. I wanted a boy than this thing, because that this thing I've seen many people developing that psychotic symptoms. And another thing, what I understand, because the mother is in the grandma, her parents, and the child infant grows with the maternal grandmother. Maybe the kids are more fond of maternal grandmothers than paternal grandmothers. There is maybe early 5 months, 6 months, this sensitivity, what you told. That some other things I wanted to share with you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Ramakrishnan. I think some very, very important points. And you're right that, this whole concept of the fact that there is a link between mother and in fetus is not something new. I think people have known, but I think the science of it has expanded, and more from a more story, from a more positive mental health kind of a thing, to look at how we need to protect mothers during that period. I think that you've raised some very, very pertinent issues, and I think that what you said about maternal sensitivity, about the gender of the infant, we've seen that quite a lot. A lot of the pressure on mothers to have a male child, whether she wants it. For a mother, all children are equal, but the kind of pressure that she goes through to have a male child is immense. And something that we cannot even, as maybe middle class families, educated families, we can't even fathom the kind of stress that they go through every time. There's kind of fear that, oh my God, I hope I don't have another girl child. I hope I don't have to face criticism again. Can you imagine the immense stress that they must be going through because of that? Very valid points.
Dr. Indumati?
Yes, sir. Madam, thank you very much for the wonderful session. It's very informative. Radhika ma'am had asked one question. Ma'am, you would like to ask directly? You are mute, I think, ma'am. Yeah, you can as well, Indumati.
It's about transgenerational transmission. Is it not for fathers, ma'am? Is it?
Good question. Right now, it is not. It's not been demonstrated so much in fathers. It's basically demonstrated in mothers. A lot of it has been shown in animal models. Again, maternal rats, not so much paternal rats, because I mean it is more the in utero effect and the subsequent sensitivity issues which make a lot of difference. So not yet among fathers.
So in
But
that,
it happen to boy children. So it doesn't necessarily happen with girl kids. So it can happen that the mother and the grandmother have gone through trauma. There's a male child. The male child may have poor attachment because of the epigenetic effects. So it is in that sense transgenerational.
so it is true for a biological mother, and also if we are having a kind of other artificial donor thing and all, ma'am.
So in surrogate, it is slightly different, you see, because if there's a surrogate, the surrogate's mental health makes a lot of difference. And the epigenetics will also make a difference in terms of even if there's a surrogate. Because from the surrogate, it is more the womb environment. From the biological mother, it is the epigenetics. And one point which Dr. Ramakrishnan raised about orphanages, in fact, most of the work on maternal deprivation was done in Romanian orphanages, where in fact, a lot of these theories initially started in the Romanian orphanage, and any talk on maternal attachment and sensitivity actually starts with the Romanian orphanage study. So you're very right in some of those things.
Dr. Sri Mishra has commented about the current situation, and also she's asking whether government and private sector, if they understand much about all these things, will they give more maternity leave for new moms?
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the need for maternity and paternity leave. I would not only say maternity leave. I think, like I mentioned, the role of fathers is very important, and not to put all the onus on the mother. The government of India, of course, has 6 months of maternity leave, which is a very generous leave compared to many parts of the world. Only Scandinavian countries, France, UK have longer leaves of 1 year, 2 years. America hardly gives any leave. And there's a lot of movement now in the US about showing this data and emphasizing about the need for longer maternity leaves and also paternity leaves.
And TCS and other multinationals are giving up to 1.5 years.
It's fantastic. I mean, a lot of this in the issue of maternity leave, there's many people feel resentful about maternity leave. Like if you have 4 colleagues and 2 go off on maternity leave, they, oh, I have to do all the work. But I always say that, you're contributing to society. Why are you having children? Because children have to contribute to society. So let us think that the extra work that we are doing when a colleague goes on maternity leave is basically our contribution to society and developing a healthier child and a healthier adult. So I think if we have that kind of a mental attitude to maternity leave, our approach to our colleagues, women colleagues who take maternity leave will be very different.
Dr. Ashok has appreciated your work, ma'am, and also we would like to know if the studies have controlled for family history prior to pregnancy as well as medical events perinatal.
Yes, there's a lot of things we control for, which included family history as well as, in fact, we took women who did not have any medical problems. So that we don't confound that with, diabetes, hypertension, because all of that can take problems. ALSPAC controlled for many of these things. So yes, a lot of the findings are controlled.
Dr. Bharati Challa has given positive comments about the talk. And Dr. Arva Badami wanted to know, they have foundation in Pune, Maharashtra, it seems, ma'am. They have a myth or something. Until 4 months of pregnancy, they should not reveal the matter. So they have difficulty in bringing out mothers for their care. So what can be done about it like that? To overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, in the Pune organization basically does a lot of traditional, uses Indian systems of medicine to do the Garbh Sanskar. I know the work they do. I think a lot of the thing about not revealing is related to our own Indian things about, we hide many things, no? When girl gets engaged, we don't tell till the marriage takes place. I mean, it's a lot of, again, related to the fact that a lot of abortions happen. So it's considered negative that if you tell people, then there may be an abortion or something like that. So I think, again, these are all part of our myths and mythologies. It's not the same in Western countries where people are, the rates of, maternal mortality are low. So here, if you know, in baby showers in India, we never buy clothes for the baby or crib for the baby till the baby is born. It's only celebration of the mother. The Valagapu or Simantam is basically a celebration of the mother. Whereas in the US, that is the time you give all the kids things are given to the mother when she's in her 8th month. The reason is because infant mortality is so high in India that we think it's apshakun to actually do any of those things. So I think a lot of it is related to our own morbidity and mortality issues, where we feel very scared. There's a sense of vulnerability. So that's why all of these things come in.
This kind of awareness programs probably raise the people to come out for the help. And Dr. Satyamurthy is a very active person in DMHP program, ma'am, in Tamil Nadu. So he would like to know how to initiate Amma Manasu kind of program in our state. So that
that's probably a talk in itself, but I would say simple training obstetricians, ANMs. We already have an ANM manual available, which can be sent to you and translated into Tamil. And a lot of obstetricians from Chennai are very enthusiastic and keen, and we are training them right now. We've trained one big lot in Pondicherry and in Chennai. So please liaise with all of them. They are very enthusiastic about starting this program. So I think that the need is there. People are there. We just have to, you have some very dynamic ministers now. So maybe you can tell them to start the program.
Dr. Ramesh Babu would like to know what is the impact of prenatal maternal stress on the incidence of autism in infants?
Yeah, so Dr. Ashok is also here. He's an autism researcher. So like I mentioned, there is some data from the UK that very early first trimester stress seems to have some relationship, but it is not still proven completely. There was some data which suggested it originally, and there was a lot of fear that SSRIs and autism, there is some good relationship. But what they found when they looked at data more carefully was that there was no relationship. In fact, untreated depression had a higher relationship. But autism is more complex. I don't think it's only related to mental health. It's probably related to many other issues happening in the uterine environment.
Also, Alok Jyoti wants to know, any specific guidelines for OG friends during antenatal postnatal period? I think,
like I mentioned, I think a lot of it is related to early assessment, screening, and having some kind of a stepped care approach. Also, if, like Dr. Ramakrishnan also mentioned, if a woman is on any medication, not to stop it suddenly, to liaise very actively with mental health professionals. So what we do in our perinatal service, and Endu is work there and she's doing that work herself, is that any woman who is wanting to become pregnant or becomes pregnant and has a mental health problem, we make a care plan for her. And the care plan includes liaison with the obstetrician, with the neonatologist. We have a form which we fill in and send to the obstetrician so that they're completely aware of what is going on. I think educating them and liaising with them very closely is what is important. And I find that the obstetricians are very open because they see most women go and sob to them about their life problems. They don't come to us, you know. That is one time of a woman's life when she gets access to a doctor and she goes and talks to the obstetrician. So equipping them with skills actually makes them much more, open to doing some of this, and they understand why medications need to be given. We started a certificate course in perinatal mental health, and the largest number of people who applied were obstetricians. They wanted to do a certificate course. So I think there is a strong need, and we need to reach out to them now.
They are more anxious about medication and interfering in pregnancy. Some complication may come. So that anxiety is shown like that, stop the medicine, why to take antibiotics. That is the thing. That as you told, that is awareness, what is happening in obstetricians is very welcome. And we have to have more advertisement and other things and to publicize all these things. And every maternity hospital should have a counselor at least.
That's right. Dr. Sharada Menon, every month she calls me up and says, Prabha, try and see that there's a psychiatrist in every maternity hospital.
Yes,
That
yes,
should be
she's
our
fond
aim.
of that. She's fond
But
of
one of the things that the obstetricians in Chennai have done is that they have created posters which say that if you have a mental health problem, if you're sad, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, it may have an impact on the child. Please inform your obstetrician. And they put it up in their clinics, which I think is such a good step. So those are the kind of things which we need to do as a body, you know.
Yes. Maybe someone we can take up this challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Topic is very interesting and so many questions are queuing up, ma'am. How many more questions we can take up?
Dr. Indupati can, Dr. Srinivasa Murthy, legends, senior Srinivasa Murthy and Dr. Mohan Isek are there. Can they enlighten something about their experience?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Then you can invite them, sir. I am not able to see the chat box also. There is some issue.
Okay. Sir, Dr. Professor Srinivasa Murthy, sir.
His audio is not connected, sir.
Okay.
Third left.
Dr. Mohan Isek.
Mohan?
Dr.
Mohan
Mohan
Isek.
Isek. He is connecting from Australia.
No. He's in Bangalore now.
Okay.
In which ID she is there? Because all the participants are muted, sir.
Yeah, maybe they're all muted, sir.
Okay, if I unmute all?
Yes, no problem.
No, the participants are unmuted themselves.
Sir is not there.
Okay, madam.
Maybe it's just
You can continue. And I think we can have another 5 minutes because madam is very sharp in their timing and given lot of opportunity for questions. That's what the madam has told.
Ma'am, you are able to see the chat box. You want to?
I can
pick
see.
up the question?
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, there are some questions. I have a question about your experience on how psychological intervention provided during the antenatal period improves child psychological well-being. That's such a fantastic question. Bala has asked this. In fact, there are very few studies which have actually looked at this. There are some trials where they have done used interpersonal therapy in the prenatal period and looked at infant behavior after the baby was born, small groups only, and have actually found a beneficial effect on infant behavior when mother was treated through psychotherapy in the antenatal period. What techniques can help cope with antenatal stress in women? I think basic principles of CBT. Dr. Vikram Patel has actually done a very nice study where he used very simple methods of CBT used by community workers and found that that was quite useful. And also trying to understand what is the stress related to. If the stress is related to things like partner violence, conflict at home, maybe addressing some of those issues will be very useful instead of putting all the onus on the mother. And so I think that is one message that I want to get across, that when we say that prenatal stress is responsible for this problem, a lot of pressure on the mother, you should be happy, you should be happy, you should be happy. See, if you're not happy, all this is again putting pressure on the mother. I think the important thing is to see what are the factors which are causing that stress and addressing those factors. Then we've discussed about the other things. There is, of course, there's some issue about job loss due to being pregnant. I think it's an important issue, and it happens in some places where they will ask you whether, do you plan to get pregnant, or are you pregnant and how can I take you? I think these are things which, policies, gender-friendly policies are very important. And like I said, we are contributing to society by supporting a woman who's pregnant. And I think we should always remember that. I think more or less I have answered most things. Yeah, at some point or the other. There's one hand from somebody called Sangeeta. Maybe she can type a question or we can take it later. My email was there, so anybody who wants to get in touch with me, I'll put it up again. Please feel free to write to me. any tool that anybody wants or anything that anybody wants, please feel free to write to me. Or if anybody wants to work in this area and wants to do research and be part of the cohort, most welcome.
Okay, madam. Okay. And she is, anybody is a member in this Mark Society as well as in perinatology. Maybe she can do something.
Yeah, Indu is a budding perinatal psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, shall we wind up the session, sir?
Before concluding, I'll be happy,
Memento.
proud to present this memento to Professor Prabha Chandra Madam. And
Thank you so much.
grateful to you all for this wonderful time you gave us, and this will be delivered to you in a couple of days. I will meet you personally when I come to Nimans, madam. So definitely we'll have something for the South Zone as well as this. Someone we can take some other thing, because there are now divisions. Now Telangana has started the initiative Samanvi.
Yes.
Andhra Pradesh has started the Samanvi program. Maybe
Yes.
we can spread across and give the message to public as well as obstetricians and other people, key stakeholders, whatever I can say. So thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks a lot. And thank you to my dear friends Radhika and Endu.
Thank you, madam.
Welcome,
And
madam.
Manori.
Rita, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Prabha. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, madam.
Good evening, all. It was indeed a very long awaited session for us, because when we started Samanyu at that time itself, we were thinking of celebrating Maternal Mental Health Day, and COVID actually took away that specific day from us. And I'm very grateful to Prabha Chandra ma'am for delivering this talk today in such a lucid and beautiful way. And from the whole team of Samanvi, I thank you so much, ma'am, for this this evening.
Thank
And
you so much.
Manohari ma'am, she agreed for chairing the session the first time itself when I asked her that over the WhatsApp chat. And thank you, Manohari ma'am, for agreeing to chair the session and giving your contributions and comments to this particular talk. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank our president and our Suresh Kumar sir and the whole IPS South Zone office bearers for for supporting us and helping us to conduct this program almost every month. And without your help and support, I don't think that we would have been able to conduct these sessions this way. And I would like to thank each and every person present here as the audience, and expressing your interest and asking your queries and doubts regarding this particular topic, and making this event a successful one. For each and every participant, on behalf of Samanvi, I'm thanking you. And of course, without showing my gratefulness to my own team, Samanvi team, Dr. Radhika Reddy, Dr. Indumati, Dr. Nivedita, and Dr. Preeti, this vote of thanks won't be complete. Along with that, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Atma team technical support for helping us to conduct the Zoom meeting and getting all the notifications ready on time. So I thank each and everybody once again before concluding this program. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam, once again.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you,
Prabha madam. It was
Thank
very
you, ma'am.
informative.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.